So we're taping now, right?
We are.
Okay. I have some things I want to go into in your book. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
I want to point out, I have this whole index. I've got Trotsky as McLuhan, page numbers. Ben Watson on McLuhan. Ben Watson as McLuhan. Frank Zappa as McLuhan. McLuhan's alphabetic effect. McLuhan's history, in quotes. Frank Zappa's mediacology. A whole bunch of languages, fusion, and first nature and second nature. So those are topics that we're going to eventually maybe get to if we can stay linear enough. So I'm going to the Ben Watson as Marshall McLuhan, page 124. It says middle of the page.
Bob, has it ever struck you that actually you are mad?
Oh, that's a given, Ben. I am a stalwart performer in the Mad Parade you guys have every year. Mad Pride Parade, right?
Right, okay.
You didn't even know that I flew over and participated. Me and James McDougall, we go way back. His name, McDougall?
Good, yeah, Jim McDougall, yeah.
We go way back. We've been monitoring you for years, Ben. You know, you finally arrived at a point of frustration that you're ready to talk. Let it out. Okay, so on page 124, in the middle of the page, it says, art, I think this is it. The heck with that, I'm not sure it's a me, I'm going to 220. Let's start with the 22 faction. 220B. At the bottom, B means at the bottom. You say, footnote, blinded by concepts, comma, urine, room, and writing a pen. There's your big pen. Blinded by concepts. Now that is footnote 8, so you go up to the top and you say, you're quoting Joyce. As we there are, where are we there from atomic top to T2 totalitarian TT2 And you say, the physical act of mouthing ooh resists the totalizing community established by the philosophers we. And we is in quotes. Footnote 8, blinded by concepts, urine and writing a pen. Blinded by concepts is something that McLuhan always talked about. He stressed percept over concept. Now, so there's a rubbing up similar approaches.
Enlighten me, Bob. Tell me a bit, because you're meant to be telling me about McLuhan in the same way as I'm going to skewer you with my Marxism.
Yes.
Tell me a bit more about percept versus concept.
We will go to the next two quotes. I just need a quote from...
Sorry. Okay.
Page 275, footnote 84. It actually begins on page 274 at the bottom. To the materialist, the absolute is the actual world in dialectical development which eludes our ordering concepts. That's literally McLuhan. Then I will go to, and I'll explain that in a minute, 275, then I jump up to 276 middle, and we have a quote. It comes from Lenin, I think.
Okay, now, can I just stop you there, Bob, and just do a little footnote to anyone listening to this program, that you come from the CIA, you've turned sides, but you are someone with a photographic memory, and all this business about where it is on the page and the page number is very important to you and your sense of reporting back to the authorities. You may be using it now for the other side, but it might be a little bit confusing for ordinary listeners to some kind of talk radio or some kind of archive.org experience or some kind of iPod listening experience to have someone so intent on exactly where it's said and the place on the page. But I know this because J.H. Print, the poet, talked to me about his photographic memory, and he said he can always find something back in the book because he knew where it was on the page, so you could just riffle through the pages and bang, there it is, which is a special mnemonic technique which I think for me recalls Giordano Bruno and various occult ways of remembering stuff. But the way you talk is quite extraordinary in its specificity, and it's very flattering when you're looking at my book because I feel, oh, someone's really looking at it. But I just want to point that out to listeners, and I'm sorry I interrupted because I want you to get back to Lenin.
And also, I was in such a rush, I forgot to say what the book is. We're quoting from something called Art, Class, and Cleavage, and a fantastic subtitle, Quantolum concerning materialist aesthetics. Can you say Quantolum? I don't know how you say that.
Quantolum cunque. Look, to talk Latin, you've got to talk English. I mean English, not your American kind of mixture of Irish and black and all that stuff over there. You've got to talk the stuffy-nosed Oxford English, because these people really understand how to talk Latin. Now, I hope listeners will recognize the irony of what I'm saying, since obviously Latin was spoken by a Roman Empire based in Italy. However, that culture was hijacked by a certain kind of imperialism, basically British imperialism, but that imperialism was kind of adopted in America too by a certain ruling stratum. Don't you think?
Okay, got that.
Yeah.
Art, class, and cleavage. I have no problem with what you just said. Now, the quote I'm taking from Lenin, you say...
the way you say Lenin, it sounds like John Lennon.
What am I supposed to say?
Well, I don't know, but I call him, it's Vladimir Ilyich Lenin. Lenin.
Okay, I'm going to learn
right.
this. Lenin.
Well, no, that's a bit overplayed, Bob. It's a bit overplayed. Like, we're doing radio now. It really matters. It's a bit overplayed to say Lenin, because that's not quite how you say it, but it's definitely Lenin, not Lennon.
Okay.
Yeah, you got that.
Lenin,
yeah, okay. Right, I'm happy now. Carry on, sorry.
Yeah. Lenin's keen attention to the dialectics of empirical natural science provides a striking confirmation of the correctness of a sexual materialist understanding of modern art's aspiration to a non-coded natural language. And here's the quote.
Did I really say that? I can't believe these things. These are okay. Well, I'll stand by it now, but it's a new idea to me.
Yeah. It's like you were in trance when you were writing. This is 12 years ago or something. And it's a strange state of mind, and you've finished doing Negative Dialectics of Poodle, and you're now justifying that book with this book. And yes, it's like you've never had the mirror held up to you.
But it's the length of the sentences and how one clause goes on to another. I mean, it's quite inimical to spoken reception that I imagine anybody hearing this stuff we're going to talk is, how they're going to receive it. When you read it out, I'm thinking, but can I understand it read out? It was written on a page. And on a page, your eye can scan back and go, oh, this is a difficult sentence, and then you go back a bit and you go forward a bit. But on the radio, or listening to a podcast, or listening to a broadcast, you can't freeze it. I mean, however technical we are, there is something about listening to sound where you don't expect to be able to stop and go back, which is, what text does. So when you read my text, I feel they're very textual and not very oral,
Yes, even though it's written by an oral mind, because you're always spouting your own oral sentences on your show, which nobody can follow. You're doing text, but for some reason you're on the radio and you don't think it's textual because you're reading it from your notes or something.
Well, I'm very interested in the intertextual and the intersexual and the whole in between, because it seems the written text, which most interests me, conversely I just deny completely what I've just said. This should appeal to you as a fan of McLuhan. I'm going to completely contradict myself. The text that I really like, and maybe you, because of your logical CIA type training, you'll probably be able to explain this back to me better than I can say it. But the written text that interests me most are the ones which echo the spoken word. I don't really like texts which are done by dry people who only chop up and manipulate text. I like to hear a voice which sounds like it can actually speak it and comes from speaking.
Right, and you're saying that what I just read from you didn't sound like that.
Well, I was kind of anxious because I was thinking, how can I understand this phrase after this phrase? And then there's another phrase, and I was sort of like intimidated by it. And I thought I should just voice the common thing that might happen if people listen to what we're saying, because I'm very aware in our conversations that I'm not just talking to you. I have in my mind a big audience, and that's why it's exciting talking to you. This is not like a phone conversation. This is like almost a panel discussion in front of a lot of rather seething unpleasant, difficult people.
Yes, who would rather be up on the panel themselves. But we've hijacked a spot on Resonance FM, and we can fill it up.
Yeah.
So I'll just reread that sentence. Lenin, you see, you screwed me up. Forget it. I'm talking about Vladimir Lenin, not John Lennon. So Lenin's keen attention to the dialectics of empirical natural science provides a striking confirmation of the correctness of a sexual materialist understanding of modern art's aspiration to an uncoded natural language. Okay. Here's what you cite to prove that sentence from Lenin. Experience is that over which our mind has no command. That which our desires, our volition, cannot control. That which is given and not of our making. Experience is the object that faces the subject. Now, you don't realize how much that is McLuhan. But McLuhan's point was that television provided that very simulation of the way perception goes faster than concepts. Now, we go to these two terms, percepts, concepts. McLuhan used to say that needs come before behavior. Needs dictate behavior. And that meant sensory appetites. And needs before concepts. I've already blown it, but I'll start it again.
Well, no, but I want to get back to your original comparison of what McLuhan, your leap. You say Lenin says this much, but McLuhan says a bit more. But Lenin's talking about experience, but I don't think Lenin would say that anyone, a baby or a 3-year-old, or indeed anybody facing television is not having an experience. So I can't quite see why it's such a leap from Lenin to McLuhan because of saying, well, television could be an experience. I don't think Lenin is saying in a romantic way, only climbing a mountain is an experience, or only something unsullied by the urban milieu is an experience, or anything unsullied by the... he's not saying we need to have natural experiences. He's talking about experience. And I think Lenin would be the first to say, with McLuhan, that something like television is something to do with the mind and politics and concepts, but it's also an experience, and the Lenin sentence is allowing us to see that. So I don't see any great sort of leap from the McLuhan, although, he's living in a more modern age where television is more ubiquitous, so maybe he's mentioning television. It was quite difficult in the era that Lenin wrote in to talk about television, because nobody had TV sets when he was writing in Russia, But I don't, insisting on experience seems to me to the idea of experience gets hijacked by the romantic bourgeoisie, the people who want to escape what everybody's really in, whereas the real romantic tradition, the one that I would adhere to, would be trying to address the experience that we're all in which case everyone's got TV sets, or, to move on, computer screens, or modern technology in their houses, but that is part of their experience. So that's how I see the difference between the two quotes. I like the McLuhan for bringing it up to date, but I don't see that the Lenin is holding us back.
No, that's right. And my words did not create the intention I was hoping for, so that's okay. McLuhan said that communication, in terms of matching exactly what we mean to someone who's listening, or me listening to you, never happens. It's always confusion going on. So Well, Bob, I adhere to V.I. Voloshinov, and the idea that if what you expressed was completely understood, understanding is about a difference. It's that we posit signs and we say words in order to have a discussion. To have a discussion, you need misunderstanding. Total understanding would be static. It would be boring. It would be God. It would be religion. Nothing would happen. That real dialogue has to pivot on these things that we posit, and then I wait for you, Bob, to say, what do you think of this thing? And that's proper dialogue. Yes, okay. I want to go. I'm trying to explain the difference between percepts and concepts. So
Okay, sorry. Let's get back to that. Percepts versus concepts in the vocabulary, the ideas set up by Marshall McLuhan, and I'd love you to explain a bit more about that.
Yeah, percepts meant direct sensory experience. Concepts were the replay of direct sensory experience through the mind, thought, and speech, at least in the beginning. So concepts are never percepts. They alter the subsequent percepts. And so concepts are the beginning of the medium. And the medium distorts. So when the electric environment came in, there was a new level of experience, as you explained it, and as Lenin would agree. But the medium that people were used to in playing out their response to the experience, the conceptual media, was books and newspapers, maybe even radio. The fact that television was different, involved more senses, created a new experience, which changed the relationship of the concepts of TV that were evoked in relation to the concepts of previous media. Thus begins the public worry about whether Johnny can still read. Isn't that one of Zappa's songs?
Absolutely. I should have leapt in quicker there and say, Johnny can't read, guitar track on Shut Up and Play Guitar.
Yeah, okay, you got me.
Yeah. So that's a little bit of. I should explain to anyone listening. Well, unless if they missed our first program, I'm talking to Bob because Bob is a McLuhanite and I'm a Marxist, but we both love Zappa, and so Zappa's become our common ground, our common bone of contention that we can use to explain to each other what we're thinking about, and it feels like a great transatlantic over-the-water handshake because there's been a lot of hostility between the McLuhanites in America and the Marxists in Europe, misunderstandings, but with Zappa we think we found some way of communicating, and that's what we're up to on these programs.
Yeah, and we are using these dialogues to start some kind of revolution, or to explain the ones that are going on, or to help the ones that are going on. This is we're not just talking away in a toilet. No,
part of this revolution is Trotsky's idea that an idea becomes a fact, or a fact becomes an idea, and it's an endless chain. And that's where that's something I disagree with how you express McLuhan, which is the idea that a concept can never become a percept, because it seems to me that sitting there bored stiff with educational garbage being given me, or in when I was younger, religious circumstances, that's exactly where the concept was frozen into a thing which I was inflicted with that became maybe an unpleasant percept, but a percept. So I think the concept can become a percept in the sense that maybe it's a deprivation zone or an attack on you, but I don't quite accept that it all goes one way. I do think it comes the other way. It comes back and gets you. That the conceptualization of our lives, the ways we think about things, come back and inflict us. It doesn't just go one way. And so when you said that the percept becomes a concept, but the concept never becomes a percept, my dialectical philosophy was a little bit upset then, Bob.
Well, it's amazing. I start saying something, then you object, and your objection is what I'm going to say.
Well, this is because really we are the same mind. We are the same. We are the same reaction to the global problem, and we are having to work it out through time, which obviously is a spherical constant, doesn't really exist, but we're having to do that because for some reason. So we'll have to do it. So go on.
Yeah, isn't it in Eliot's Sweeney Agonistes? The character says, I gotta use words when I talk to you.
Well, that's true, but that's a bit of a lowering of the tone when you quote T.S. Eliot, you know.
Okay. All right, so the interesting thing is, I did say that the concepts evoked by television have to relate back or contend with the concepts that had already been established by earlier media. Definitely, since McLuhan's talking about the tactile interval and the key to his drama of cognition, or stages of apprehension, definitely the concepts filter the percepts. And there's a dialectic. That's exactly what McLuhan, I thought I was leaning towards that. But you spelled out what should have been said, and that's what I was trying to say. So that's good.
Yeah, okay.
So we can move on.
I'm not sure about filter. The word filter I don't like, because it's like you have a clean conceptual grid and then the perceptions hit you. For me, this is Kantian. It's not yet Hegelian or even Marxist, that we have a grid to recognize the experience that comes through, and then if it hits this bit on the grid, then we know it's there. And it's pixelization, and it's how we record things, and it's when you do raster scans on newspapers and you get dots, and it simplifies it, and that's necessary for a certain form of recording data. But the forming of concepts and the human brain versus experience, I think using that, I mean, a lot of McLuhan seems to me about, really it's a philosopher looking at metaphors that have been used throughout human history to discuss philosophy, and finding they always fail because they're always generated by the technology of the times. So you think, well, can't we have a more advanced philosophy that recognizes that? Why have we always been run by these metaphors? Why can't we have real philosophy that isn't run by these, oh, it's like a horse, no, it's like a steam engine, no, it's like a telephone, no, it's like a television, and you go, well, the human brain isn't really like any of those. What's this inability to speak about the actual thing? I've lost it now. I've stopped talking to you, and I've run through history, and I'm sorry.
You're going to be apologizing a lot, Ben. What you just said is totally appropriate. McLuhan began understanding media with the chapter on the spoken word, and he said flower of evil. He certainly was aware of the problem of speaking, and he did not limit himself to speaking or writing. And his whole effort was to translate the book, the philosopher, the art landscape that hit the nail on the head for him, and that was Finnegans Wake.
Now, Bob, now we're entering the zone where neither of us know where we're going to end up talking. Yeah. Because, I mean, when you reduce what I say to McLuhan, I still have, Bob's on his hobby horse, and I'm thinking, I'm quite proud here, because I'm thinking, I'm not reducing everything you're saying to Marx. I'm not going, well, Marx says this or Marx says that. I'm just saying Marx described reality, so I'll throw reality back at you. I don't need to name anybody, whereas you keep going back, still a bit of a fanboy about McLuhan, whereas I feel I'm a bit more mature than you about Marxism, because I kind of understand that that capitalism is going on, and it's sort of bigger than Marx and bigger than you and me, and it's humanity doing what it's doing at the moment. So it's, anyway, I had something nice to say at the end of that, but now I've forgotten what it is.
Finnegans Wake.
Yeah, exactly. Because you see, when you mention Finnegans Wake, or you could be mentioning Zappa, and then we get into this other area where I really like talking to you, because we're not defending a particular position or a theory that we've worked out. We know we like it, but we don't quite know why we like it yet. You need to explain it to me, and I hope I can explain some of it to you. And that introduces a kind of benign, prolix efflorescence in what we're saying, which is not like politics, or what I always hated about politics, and in fact I still hate about politics, which is this defending of a particular set of principles and just having a bash,
Yes, I'm not a McLuhanite, but I do bring up McLuhan for people to hear things they haven't heard before.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. You're telling me about McLuhanite things, but I've got to nudge you a bit, because I'm thinking about not just you and me, but anybody who might listen to this, that they might go, well, this dialogue's all right, but I mean, there's this English asshole called Ben Watson I can't stand. I mean, obviously, it's taken as read. I mean, having read the Zappa, websites, they all hate me. That's taken as read. But they might also go, but there's this Bob, and everything he says is always, oh, but McLuhan said that, and that might get a bit annoying.
Okay. Oh yeah, I've been doing this for 25 years. The hate directed at you is minuscule compared to the hate directed at me. Ben.
Oh, good.
I mean,
Well, it's nice to hear. I'll shelter behind you and the hatred directed at you, and I can feel, protected. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, what happens, though, is when I talk about McLuhan, it all gets bogged down, and I apologize. I always have to apologize for bringing it up. But others call in, if it's a talk show, and say, oh, that's amazing, I'm going to read more McLuhan. So you're not going to hit everybody, but I stimulate some people. But we're not just working for them. I'm not trying to promote McLuhan. That's why we come into Finnegans Wake. Finnegans Wake and Zappa are way more important than McLuhan or Marx. At least while Zappa was alive. Now we're more important because we're still alive, and we are sitting on the shoulders of timid little midgets, very powerful dwarfs, right?
Okay.
Rumpelstiltskins. That's what we're standing on the shoulders of.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know. I'll say this, that you're spelling out a Finnegans Wake. When you do Finnegans Wake on your show, it's totally ridiculous, irrelevant, and a waste of the listener's time. Because at best, if they like it, they'll say, I love the music, the flow. There's no, that's a univocal interpretation of Finnegans Wake. Finnegans Wake includes all experience that's coming and that was. It includes email. There's even a place called Emailia, a word in Finnegans Wake.
Well, sorry, maybe I should just explain to anyone listening to this that I have a radio show called Late Lunch Without a Lunch at 2 o'clock on Wednesdays UK time on Resonance FM. 104.4 FM if you're living in London, but otherwise resonancefm.com, and you can listen to it live, or you can go to archive.org and put in Late Lunch or Audio Esenplasm and hear past programs. And one of the things I do on it is I read quite a lot of Finnegans Wake out loud. Now, Bob here is accusing me of, which is exactly the accusation which my poet guru J.H. Prynne gave to me when I said, well, the point about Finnegans Wake is to leave it out, read it out, lead it, read it. I made exactly the same slip as the transcription of the lyrics of You Will Obey Me While I Lead You and Eat the Garbage of I'm the Slime from Overnight Sensation by Frank Zappa. And Prynne said that I was giving people, by arguing that Finnegans Wake is best experienced by reading it out loud, I'm giving everyone an easy bourgeois way in. Exactly. Because the real experience of Finnegans Wake has to be picking up the book and having a go yourself. But yes. I maintain, versus what you and Prynne are saying, that the experience of attempting to read it gives you things which, if you don't attempt to read it out loud on the radio, you'd never see. So for my own personal education, I have to have a go. And my voice is not an actor's voice, and I'm not giving a great reading which flows and everything works. Sorry, Bob, you forced me into a defense, the language of apology and zapology is always corrupt. So, it's a kind of wrong position I'm in. But the attempt to actually read out Finnegans Wake, you're dissing it as like, well, everybody should read it. But, no, you do it. I mean, performing it is a whole new thing, Not many people do it. I mean, when you try and perform this thing, all sorts of things happen in my head and in the sounds of my voice and,
It's commendable activity.
I love the word commendable. It's such a put down.
yeah, commendable. But the point is, Ben, that Finnegans Wake has no content. And when you start translating it verbally, you're implying there's content. What Joyce was doing was showing the transparency that radio created. The annihilation of every human form of communication and social structure, leading to Armageddon, war, apocalypse, excitement, bliss, all kinds of things. And each one of the 100 thunders refers to a technological intervention.
Well, Bob, you passed me Master McLuhan's, or was it his son's, analysis of the...
Yes.
Should inform people that Finnegans Wake is interspersed with 100-letter words, which are meant to represent the thunder which Giambattista Vico said created civilization, that it was the thunder in the skies that made humans look up and realize there was something else. And this began, I mean, it's a myth that describes what Marx would call the beginning of the accumulation of surplus value. It's when there's something happens which makes society split up. That some people understand the thunder and some people don't, and kind of history begins. I mean, we're away from happy hunter-gatherers living in a communal way, and we're entering this, hopefully, a blip in the development of humans. You know, this cruel blip. At least that's the way the Marxist sees it. This split apart humanity, and I hope that what me and Bob are involved in is an attempt to return humanity on a higher level to the communal situation where there isn't this split and the fear of the thunder. But this thunder is basic to the production of everything that we know, and everything that we know will be transformed in revolution. So it's important to understand what produced it, and I never quite know in these discussions, Bob, how much we need to explain to everyone else what the hell we're talking about. How do you feel about that?
I don't underestimate them. You've only got an audience of 5 or 10 people, and they like your show, and Gamma in the crowd, they tend to understand it, and they dig what you're doing. We're talking to them and anybody else. I mean, I'm not worried about understanding, being understood.
That doesn't worry me, but at the same time, there's a certain high I get in these discussions because I have a fantasy of a broader listenership.
Well, I'm doing that too.
I mean, I also think when James Joyce wrote Finnegans Wake that he'd had a certain success with Ulysses, and his idea of Finnegans Wake was a hilarity about inflicting what he was doing on this international readership which had arisen because of Ulysses. I mean, you know, it had been bootlegged in Japan. You know, he was aware that Ulysses was an avant-garde phenomenon. And so when he wrote Finnegans Wake, even though it was the most anti-commercial book you could imagine, that he had an idea of the outrage he was going to perpetrate by writing a book like that, and that was exciting. And so it's keeping both things in mind. I mean, it's a little like Plato's definition of the dialectic. It's the one and the many. At the same time, you want to be honest to your real friends, but at the same time, the idea of broadcast, the idea of everybody looking at it, is very exciting. And if you can try and balance those two, or put those two together, or keep them, then things get better than they would be if you decided, well, you're a mass artist or an elite artist. And I don't like the people who decide they're one or the other. I always think they're bad.
I'm always both, Ben. We never get it done, and it's always enough. Okay, that's going to be one of our slogans, I hope. We never get it done, but it's always enough.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to make myself understood, and so I'm being very tolerant and patient, listening to your misinterpretations of me, which is okay, sort of. But if we keep doing this for hours, great. I want to do this for a long time because there's a lot to clarify. You know what I mean? So I'm in it for the long distance.
Well, so am I, and I'm sorry if you feel misinterpreted. I didn't feel I was launching anything against you when I went into that. I thought I was just trying to explain certain things in my head. But if you feel misinterpreted, please come back and explain what I did that was wrong.
Yeah, and again, you misinterpreted me. I didn't mean that you were misinterpreting me. What I meant, I was referring to like 10 minutes ago. What you just said, I agree with, and what I'd enjoy, what I like about the misinterpretation, I say something and then you correct me. I find that your corrections help explain what I was going to say. And so I appreciate your misunderstanding because it leads to more clarity in my understanding of what you know and what you think I mean, and that's good. So I'm saying to realize Finnegans Wake is not just to be verbalized, and it's not just to be looked at. It's to be contemplated. It's like Zappa's project object, something to contemplate and respond to. And I think what was a genius about Finnegans Wake is that Joyce knew that Ulysses was the greatest book, the last novel, the great this and that, and then he wanted to up the ante. And he said, well, that was great for the Gutenberg phase. I'm going into the Marconi electronic galaxy, and I'm going to present a way to respond to the new radio environment and the movies and telephones and all that was happening, which was built on what he learned from Eliot, Wyndham Lewis, and Pound and Yeats, the vorticist. Joyce was a vorticist. No Joyce scholar would admit that, but he was. I mean, he changed Ulysses.
Well, I mean, you're right, Bob. I mean, right in the centre of Finnegans Wake, right next to his central diagram, he goes the vortex, the vertex, and he makes jokes around that term, and he's admitting that modernist avant-garde movement in Britain was one of the things that he really adheres to, that he minds about enough to parody it. And that's what, I mean, personally, I just feel, that it's hard to explain this, but it feels so clear to me that something happened in the 1910s and 1920s around modern art that just is where I stand. That's this great break. Let's get rid of this stuffy Victorian idea of art, and let's face things in their clarity and so on. And my adolescence spent enthusing about that when I found Frank Zappa in music as against the Velvet Underground or the hippies or whoever was around. That seemed the same thing. That's why I went Zappa. It's that idea of a kind of let's clear the decks. Let's be absolutely clear about what we're doing. Let's not have any of this, oh, well, my uncle edits a magazine and it's very nice if you get involved, all that shit. Let's get rid of all that. We don't need all that. That's last year's thing, that idea of absolute freshness. And that's why also when postmodernism came along and said, oh, well, we're beyond all that and now there's a new phase, I was kind of like, yeah, but is there? Have we won that one yet? Because I didn't feel that Blast had been understood, Wyndham Lewis's magazine, or Cubism had been understood. Everything had gone back into representation and nobody seemed to understand the power of abstraction, that modernism hadn't won, in the same way that the workers hadn't seized control of the means of production, that Lenin's revolution had been smashed. So what's this like now? We're going to get beyond that when even that failed. Shouldn't we look and say, well, this got rolled back, and aren't the times in history that go backwards? Is everything always going more and more progressive, or aren't the times in which the best minds of people around go, well, actually, the last few centuries have been absolute bullshit? I mean, people talk about the Renaissance, but the Renaissance spent the whole time saying, well, actually, the classics were great. What's all this dark ages we've been through? It's awful. And we've been through a dark ages, man, and the 20s and 30s were far in advance of where we are. And so for postmodernism to come along and say, oh no, we're even cleverer than them, I think they are pygmies underneath the rotting stalks of mushrooms who don't understand anything.
I agree, but postmodernism is a conceptual response to the global satellite theater, TV, computers, and the whole media mix of the 1670s. They didn't know that Joyce had already done it.
Yeah, I mean Joyce, but also Brecht had understood it, and I think Walter Benjamin had understood it. I mean, I think there's a whole generation who understood what was coming. I don't think it's simply Joyce, that Joyce comes out of, a ferment of understanding all that. Politically, they got smashed. We had Nazism and World War, and that set everybody back. But I don't think it's simply Joyce, although I think Joyce formulated the clenched nugget of art which survives. His was the message in the bottle which really survived. Everybody else was complaining and new and tried, but his thing for me is that nugget of something.
Ben, you're going on too much. I mean, you've talked for 5 minutes. Many things in there are very valid, and I'd like to respond to a lot of things. But I'm going to go back and say this. Finnegans Wake is the great synthesis. You talked about how Joyce really wanted to make an impact. He was very upset that World War II broke out and distracted everybody from the impact of Finnegans Wake. All right? Very upset at that, right?
Yeah, of course. I mean, Joyce hated war, and yeah, he was naive, and
he didn't hate war. He thought it was badly timed. Let the world absorb his book, then have the war, and perhaps have the war over the meaning of his book. But the point is that he represented the synthesis of human achievement, built on the vortices as the extra colleagues. I mean, they're the four evangelists in Finnegans Wake.
Well, the four vortices. Who are the four? Yates. Well, Yates isn't a vorticist anyway.
Oh yes, he was the one who was most enthusiastic about Lewis.
Was he? Yeah, but he wasn't a vorticist. I mean, Yates is all involved with the Celtic twilight.
No, he dropped all that. He hung out with Ezra Pound in 1916, stayed at Pound's cottage, and learned and went on ranting about how great Wyndham Lewis was, and continued after Pound had dropped off. Anyways, the four guys, it becomes five, and it's interchangeable. But the four evangelists for Joyce would be Pound, Eliot, Lewis, and Yates. Okay?
Well, yeah, okay, in your literary reduction of Finnegans Wake to the kind of gossip.
I mean, giving the Gutenberg levels.
Duchamp
was a big effect. Duchamp was in there. But, okay, what I'm saying is that the interplay of the development of culture was wrapped up by Finnegans Wake, and it was the model for the post-war situation. And McLuhan was the first to understand that. And McLuhan was the first to say Marx made important breakthroughs, but now we have a new level of experience, and we can improvise and dance on the toes of Marx and bring in a new situation that Marx would maybe understand and celebrate. Because Finnegans Wake predicts exactly the economy we're in today. The digital economy is in Finnegans Wake.
Well, Finnegans Wake, yes, it may do, and you can read it, but it would be kind of absurd to tell people that economic students that would be great. I mean, I do tell them. I tell economic students that in not reading Finnegans Wake, you're very partial, and you might think you're revolutionary, but actually you're playing the same counters as the bourgeoisie. Why don't you read Finnegans Wake?
Now listen,
and they'll go, yeah, but that's dealt with in the literary department. Sorry, yeah.
Let me respond. I've been saying exactly that to all the different disciplines, physicists, sexologists, everybody. They are not adequate in their specialty and expertise unless they've mastered Finnegans Wake and bring it to their discipline. See, that's why we're exactly the same mind. We've been doing the same thing for 25 years. That's what's great about your book on Zappa. You said, hey, you want to understand Zappa, you got to know Lewis and Joyce.
Mm-hmm. Well,
no Zappa fan had ever thought of that.
Well, exactly. But I mean, from my background, it was more. I've got a firm understanding of the development of European modernism, and the surprising thing is that Captain Beefheart and Frank Zappa, from these very these zones of cultural upbringing, which seem very isolated from any European thought, have produced the same ideas. This coincidence needs to be understood. And my argument...
Radio, Ben. It's radio. Joyce was doing radio. They grew up on radio.
Yeah, and exactly. The way I put it was less a great technological change. It's less in the McLuhanite, way of these absolute leaps by technology, which explains everything. It was more in the sense that culture is not pass the parcel. Culture is not, I've read this, then I do that. It's not like, unless you've read Ovid, you can't write a love poem. It's more, there is humans, there is sex. If you express it, you come to the same sort of stuff, which maybe Ovid got to a long time ago. And so it's an argument about culture not residing in some kind of golden zone which only the elite have access to, that real culture should be a response to what's actually there, and there is something actually there which isn't culture. That although culture shapes the world we live in, and we all wrestle with it, that there are real things that everybody's born into. So it's a radical egalitarianism, which may be why, as an American, I find it possible to talk to you, because of the radical egalitarianism which exists in America, which Europeans find extremely hard to shake off. I mean, the elitism or the structures, you know, that there is but this, for me, is a philosophical position, that there is actually a real world, so there's a real object we could all talk about. So it's no great coincidence that two people who've never ever read each other's work might go up to something and go, you know, it's round or it's circular. You know, that those words aren't just products of culture, that there is a real world that we might be responding to. It's just, I'm just criticizing idealism.
Okay, yes, and I have no problem. I understand what you're saying, and I kind of agree. I want to say this. People read your book, and you brought up Joyce to Zappa, and he said, well, I never really read him. I took a look at the book, looked at a few pages, and I said, yeah, this guy does it right. And they say, see, Ben, he didn't know anything about Joyce, or he wasn't influenced by Joyce, blah, blah, blah. The point is that whatever Frank saw and discarded meant that he was influenced by them because he saw they were on the right path.
Well, I mean, I don't think it's influence. What I loved about the way he said it, and I'll say it back to you a little more correct, which was that he looked at Ulysses and looked at a few pages and said, that's pretty real.
Yeah.
That Zappa recognized that Joyce did the same thing he did, which is to produce reality in your work and not be frightened of it, not think it all needs to be mashed up and reprocessed as a representation. You know, we're not in Hollywood. We're not in a situation where to, you know, make a bar, we have to build an entire bar, you know, that's false to film a scene in a bar, because you're relaxed enough with people to go to your local bar and film your actors in the bar, which is a much more interesting way of doing it. And I think Zappa just, I imagine him looking at the pages of Ulysses and just seeing words he didn't understand, but also a directness about human functions and observations, which I could just see. I mean, you know...
Percepts. He was into percepts. Direct experience.
Well, okay. He was into percepts. Yeah. I mean, this is what Adorno would call the continual role of art, which is to criticize the abstractions that we use in everyday life. But then it makes you see, my political point will be...
Let me just deal with that. When you said a lot here. Yes, McLuhan said...
What is this fairness, Bob? What is this, like, equal dues? If I talk for a certain amount of time, you've got to talk for a certain amount of time. I mean, I think you should... Don't use that. Just say... Bob, Bob, I want to tell you what you should say. You shouldn't say... It's not balance. We're not dealing with balance here. We should deal with... You should get annoyed and just say, Ben, you are boring me. I need to say this.
Well, okay, that's what I mean when I'm interrupting.
That's what I thought you meant. I'm sorry, I'm just your psychoanalyst here. Let it out. Let it out, Bob.
You're not boring me. You're not boring me. You're saying very good, useful things. It's just that I think you should let me respond and fill in and elaborate on what you mean.
Oh, all right then.
I'm trying to tell you what you mean.
Okay.
Yeah, that worked.
You got 6 minutes.
Okay, what the heck? I struggle with my memory. What the hell? I got to deal with this guy who goes on and on for 5 minutes. All great stuff. And I could supplement. I need to speak into a mic and we re-edit this and have my soundtrack or multi-track panel discussion here.
No editing. This is live radio. This is hours in segments. But we have editing because we see the end coming up. So we are self-editing. It's like we now have to write the last 2 lines of the sonnet, okay? This is the form. It's a 55-minute form.
With science and percept. McLuhan said that science deals with concepts, art deals with percepts. That's interesting because that's what you're saying. But what is the perceptual environment today? First it was electronic for Zappa's time, now it's digital. You could say it's all electricity. That's true. Beefheart did a song, E-Electricity, fits in. But how do we communicate and to who when everybody's lost in a digital matrix, which is a lot different than Marx's time? Marx could write letters. He could go and show up someplace. All right?
Well, I mean, you showed up. Bob, you showed up when my second child was born. A very emotional moment for us. You showed up and behaved fantastically, and you were really helpful. So I don't feel that you, out of the ether, these concepts, or is it percept? No, it's more like a concept that Bob Dobbs couldn't show up. You did, so you showed up. So we're still showing up.
Yes, but look at the means. I don't have to fly back. Marx had to travel and give lectures to small groups and write letters and whatever else he did and write periodicals. Ancient way of organizing social energies. Mm-hmm. Now, the degree that Marx saw something that the people weren't conscious of, McLuhan's saying the same thing. McLuhan is pointing out that all of the arts, radical whatever, from 1905, including Einstein, up to 1970, were a product of radio. And so he spent his time saying that Finnegans Wake is the best mirror of our time, but Joyce did not know why he saw that. McLuhan understood, like Marx, what the unconscious means of software production were rooted in. That's an important discovery. And we need to know that when we run this revolution. What medium are we working in? And there are no media right now. It's all a seamless web, and yet everybody can have their own little matrix tube. This is the what revolution are we fighting here? What are we fighting for?
Well,
what are we trying to make everybody have cornflakes? Is that what we're doing? They'd rather have digital stuff for their chip body stomach.
I think everybody would rather have a secure existence and an understanding of what's going on, and that doesn't seem to be delivered by this seamless web of blah that you're talking about. And
I agree. That's what we're here. We're trying to help people.
And I'm trying to interrupt the seamless blah of what you're talking about with our discussion, and that's why I hold you back sometimes and try and make you explain what these names mean and so on, because I'd like this to be a little more comprehensible to anybody who tunes in. But also I like the way...
This is the guy who mouths off Finnegans Wake, which nobody knows what you're saying. It may not matter, it's music. And you're now being very literary. I agree we have to be understandable, but you're really emphasizing it.
No. I also think we have to be incomprehensible in a provocative way to spur a kind of curiosity. Because when I first heard the things in mass media which I pursued when I was young, they were incomprehensible to me but exciting. And I don't think comprehension is the be-all and end-all. I think it's energy and hooks that allow you to find out. That's very important to put in. I don't believe in producing a wall of incomprehension. I believe in interrupting the idea that you understand everything. It's very good to provoke, but at the same time you give people hooks that if they get excited by not understanding that there's ways through and we can all get in touch. I feel I'm putting out hooks to fish up people that I can talk to.
Me too. And that's the dialectical. That's the drama of cognition in dialectics. We're offering comprehension, concepts about the percepts, and we offer new percepts that you can conceptualize or not conceptualize about. It's this systole-diastole action, like the heart muscles, that we're engaged in. And we've actually created that in the digital economy.
I love the way you put it, Bob, and it's so convenient you've just said that, because we're leading up towards our 55-minute cutoff.
Good. I wrapped it up then.
You wrapped it up. You've been listening to Bob Dobbs and Ben Watson, a program that we call Marx versus McLuhan. Ben and Bob go head to head. Thank you very much for listening. Goodbye.